Hey everybody, I'm Tim Mooney. I am the director of the Timothy Mooney Repertory Theater, a touring theater company that brings shows to schools, conferences, festivals all across the US and Canada. Shakespeare's Histories is my one-man romp through all 10 Shakespeare history plays, making it absurdly easy to understand. Shakespeare's Histories, 10 epic plays at a breakneck pace, will be available to view live online this Sunday and Monday, May 24th and 25th, and again in late July and again in early September. It's just one of 8 one-man plays that I'm giving over the course of an 8-week cycle. I cycle through all 8 plays, doing a different one each week, and then I start the cycle all over again. This is the 4th in my series of introductory videos introducing these plays. I finally get Shakespeare's Histories. My goal is to double your ability to access, understand, and enjoy these plays with each of these brief 15-minute introductory videos. Hit subscribe if you want to make sure you don't want to miss any of these upcoming videos. I post these every Friday evening in advance of our Sunday and Monday shows. But for today, our topic is about how I finally got Shakespeare's Histories. Number 1, how did you go from not understanding to finally getting Shakespeare's Histories? First, a little background. Back in 2005, I started work on a one-man play called Lot O' Shakespeare, in which I would do one monologue from every Shakespeare play, determined entirely at random based on the spin of a bingo cage. There are only about 3 out of the 10 history plays that tend to get produced on a regular basis. Henry IV Part 1, Henry V, and Richard III. That's not such a great batting average for a playwright who generally is up in the 80 to 90% range, if we consider that 90% of Shakespeare's comedies will get produced on a fairly regular basis, maybe 70 to 80% of the tragedies will get done on a regular basis, but only 30%? That's a sharp drop in a batting average for any player. And so I look at that and wonder, Shakespeare didn't somehow fall off the edge and write a bunch of bad plays. He just wrote plays that we, as a modern audience, don't have such easy access to. I went back to my Shakespeare's History monologues, the ones that I had memorized for Lot O' Shakespeare, and tried something a little different with them. I did them rather than at random, by means of a bingo cage. I recited them in order, and they kind of made sense for the first time for me. And so I doubled back and stuck in more speeches to fill in the gaps and added some snarky narration, and suddenly they emerged out of a fog of ignorance into something that I could finally grasp. Question 2, why can't I understand these? What you don't understand actually reveals what the English audience probably did understand. If we're confused, it's not because Shakespeare is a confusing writer, it's because he was writing to an assumed understanding. Most events of these plays predated Shakespeare's life, or at least his writing period, from about 80 to 200 years, which is to say the equivalent of, for us, if we were looking backwards to World War II and continuing backwards to the Revolutionary War. We have a pretty good idea of the chronology of events that happened over that span of time. It's like, how well do we know Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin? With each of these historical characters, we have an image, an idea, an association, a series of associations. We kind of have a bunch of impressions already baked into the cake already. Now, if you were exposed to these plays in any way at all, the odds are that there's 2 characters you would be the most familiar with, Henry V and Richard III. Those are the 2 that are the most likely that we would go to see performed or catch on in a movie or some such. Maybe half of you would struggle with knowing which one came first, Richard III or Henry V? It's Henry. But Shakespeare's audience already knew the difference between Richard the Lionheart, who would have been Richard the First, from Richard the Second, the Child King, and Richard the Third, the Hunchback King. And likewise, they knew major differences between Henry the Fourth, Henry the Fifth, Henry the Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth. They didn't need to have it explained in the same way that we don't confuse Benjamin Franklin with Franklin Roosevelt, for instance. Question 3. What leads up to Shakespeare's history plays historically? Shakespeare assumes that we know that the English line of monarchs began with William the Conqueror in 1066. William gives way to a long line of English kings, including William II, Henry I. Geoffrey of Anjou was not a king, but became father to Henry II, who is father to 5 boys. Anytime you get that many boys in a single royal family, it's trouble. Henry II was father to both Richard the Lionheart, who ruled from 1189 to 1199, and King John, who ruled from 1199 to 1216. Shakespeare knows that you know that John was the 5th son of Henry II, but there was also a son of Henry II's 4th son. That son, Prince Arthur, should have been king, but he was only 3 years old when he would have had to step in. John, being 32 years old at that time, said, "I'll just take over." And so Shakespeare picks up this play at that point because there's been a crisis. There's a fight over who really ought to be king, and that's a dramatic, inciting incident that after King John, Shakespeare skips over 4 monarchs. Henry III, Edward I, Edward II, Edward III. 161 years. That's an average of about 40 years per king. It isn't until we come back to the reign of Richard II that trouble's starting once again, and once again, Richard II takes over as king at the young age of 10. Henry IV steals the crown from Richard II, which perpetuates another crisis, and it's going to take 4 plays to work this one out. Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and Henry V. So Henry IV steals the throne from Richard II, and Shakespeare knows that you know this already. In between the end of Henry V and the beginning of Henry VI, Henry V dies young at the age of 35 of dysentery. But Henry VI has it even worse than those 2 previous young kings, Prince Arthur, who had been 3, King Richard II, who had been 10. King Henry VI was only 8 months old when he got stuck with the Kingdom of England. There was a feeding frenzy. Following this, Shakespeare skips over another 35 years into the middle of the monarchy of Henry VIII, which climaxes with the birth of Shakespeare's own queen, Queen Elizabeth, who was born in 1533. Question 4. What does Shakespeare rewrite about history? Shakespeare changes everything that might reflect badly on Queen Elizabeth. His goal was not to write the truth. Shakespeare seems to want to trash Queen Margaret. Margaret had been the bride of King Henry VI. She was the daughter of the Duke of Anjou. That's an area in France, so she was a French duke's daughter. Shakespeare also trashes Richard III. It's quite possible that Richard's middle brother, Richard was the 3rd from Edward, Charles, and Richard. His middle brother, Charles, may have been the real bad guy, but Shakespeare puts it all on Richard, making him responsible for the death of his brother Charles, for the subsequent death of his brother Edward, previously the king, in grief over the loss of his brother Charles. Also for killing the next King Edward V, the son of Edward IV, and while he was at it, killing Edward V's other brother, clearing his way to become king himself. It was Henry VII who defeated Richard III in battle. Henry VII was father to Henry VIII, who we know was father to Queen Elizabeth. So Shakespeare wants to underline the importance of the succession of Henry VII taking over in a righteous manner, killing Richard III. And the best way to make Henry VII look really good is to make Richard III look really bad. History writes that Richard III had one shoulder somewhat higher than the other, a kind of a twist in his spine. Shakespeare takes that little bit of deformity and twists it ever farther and farther. Question 5, just what is it that holds these plays together? Succession. The handing down of the kingship from father to son, sometimes from father to nephew or to grandson. King John steals the throne from Prince Arthur. Henry IV steals the throne from Richard II. Richard III steals the throne from Charles, George, Edward V, and preempts Edward V's brother. Now, what are some of the rules that guide succession? Well, number 1, men rule. The French invoked what they called the Salic law to keep a male English king from also being on the throne of France, even though he was the son of an English king and a French queen. They cited Salic law, which insists that the monarchy be passed through male heirs only. This became the source of the big dust-up between Henry V and the French. The second rule after men rule, eldest sons rule. It's the rule of what they called primogeniture. So the eldest son gets the kingship from his father, the king. If that eldest son has a son, that grandson gets the kingship rather than son number 2, 3, 4, or 5 of the previous king. And so that created a situation where sometimes a very young king is suddenly in power and totally not ready to handle it. And yet, Elizabeth was queen. She turned out to be amazingly strong, surviving almost 50 years on the throne. But, of course, at every stage along the game, she had to overcome whatever distrust people might have of a female monarch. Keep in mind that they didn't even allow women to be actresses at that time. So Shakespeare's relentless demonstration of just how methodically and almost purposefully she worked her way down through the ages to ultimately become God's representative on the throne was probably intended to demonstrate to the Elizabethan audience of just how righteous a ruler Elizabeth was. So that's how I finally got Shakespeare's Histories. There's a lot more there to get, but if you keep these principles in mind and read them chronologically, you've already doubled your likelihood of getting these plays. Please leave comments below and more questions. I'll be doing more of these videos and would love to know what things you would love to know more about. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like or subscribe to this channel. I'll have lots more videos coming out. You won't want to miss any of them. I race through all you need to know for all 10 history plays in just 1 hour. That's Sunday, May 24th on Facebook and Monday, May 25th on Zoom. Or Sunday, Monday, July 19th and 20th, Sunday, Monday, September 13th and 14th, all at 9 p.m. Central Time. Tickets for Monday night shows are available through calendly.com/TimMooneyRep. I'll also be happy to do a Zoom conference with you and your school or your theater. I can be beamed in from where I am to where you are to share these awesome works. We are a not-for-profit educational institution dedicated to inspire, inform, enlighten, educate, and entertain. If you see the value of that, please join us. We have a Patreon campaign. You can sign on for as little as $1 a month. It has its occasional perks and occasionally a drawing for a free performance. Or you can make a one-time direct donation at timmooneyRep.com. Shakespeare's Histories is also available as a book with lots more notes and comments about all of this. You can pick one up online and find loads more stuff at timmooneyRep.com. Thanks a lot. See you on the stage.